Please stand clear of the doors. Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas.
Welcome to DisneySpace, reimagining spaces in Walt Disney World, Disneyland, and spaces beyond. And now, your host, Jeff and Mark. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and wherever you are, thank you for listening to DisneySpace, where we reimagine spaces. Mark?
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Mark. Glad we could get together this evening.
Yeah, I've been excited to start this, and this is our very first episode of DisneySpace.
Warts and all, everything about it, this is our first foray into... This is really traditional podcasting at this point. Who knows how many players there are there, but I'm looking forward to having our discussions and letting people listen in on the stuff that you and I would be talking about to each other anyway.
Yeah, and so really what we're going to be doing throughout these shows is we're going to be examining spaces that are owned by the Walt Disney Company throughout the world. And those can be Walt Disney World, Disneyland, any of the Asia parks, the Paris park, and it could also be any space, anything that they own, studios, cyberspace, anything.
Or in the case of Tokyo Disney, whatever the Oriental Land Company owns. See, you got to flex that knowledge because there's already going to be people saying, hey, these guys don't know what they're talking about.
Right. And so when you think about these spaces, everything within these spaces are provided and designed and used. So when you think of Disney World, it's full of parks and resorts and service buildings and parking lots and shopping places and things of those natures. And those are what we're referring to as spaces. And in each one of those spaces, there are buildings and courtyards and sidewalks and all kinds of things that are used and designed specifically for purposes and stakeholders and telling stories and servicing things and everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick one of these spaces, say an attraction space like a building, and we're going to reimagine it. And Disney does this all the time, and you're seeing it in Epcot today, all over Future World. Future World's not even Future World anymore. It's going to be 3 different lands.
Is it World Discovery, World
Nature,
World Nature,
World Celebration, and we don't even know where the boundaries are exactly yet. But you can see how this is done by Disney Imagineering all the time. And so I thought it would be fun for the fan base to do this, you and I, and sort of, some people call it armchair engineering. I don't like to call it armchair Imagineering because I'm standing up. I don't have an armchair. But I like to perform a mind exercise to think what these spaces could be, and nobody's going to design them, nobody's going to provide them, but wouldn't it be fun to just imagine something different? And so what we'll do week after week is we'll pick a new spot, and then one of us will express a concept idea of what that space could be alternatively. And then we'll have a discussion about that. And then the other host will counteract with a different concept, and we'll talk about that. And then maybe we'll talk about a second round of concepts, and then see what we think, see how fun it is. And we'll put some rules to these. For instance, we could have some concepts that are very, very meager and simple. In other words, if you can imagine, Carousel of Progress. Mm-hmm. A very simple change of that could be, let's vacuum the place 3 days a week instead of twice a week. And that's it. But you could also go very extreme and say, let's wreck the whole building, go all the way down to the dirt and build something new, all new. So those are the extremes that we'll put around our rules, but we may put some limitations here and there depending on what the space is. So we'll visit actual attractions. We'll visit show spaces, maybe restaurants, maybe entire lands, maybe some empty spots on any of these properties. Maybe we'll go to cruise ships, islands, maybe space itself, DisneySpace. And that's what we'll try. So I think it'll be
that'd be a fun episode. We pitch, what if in 100 years from now, the first extraplanetary Disney amusement center of some sort?
Wouldn't it be crazy? If you remember Horizons, if you remember the the spaceships that you would go through the atmosphere and look down into those big living spaces.
It was, if you've ever seen the movie Interstellar, it
Yeah,
almost seems like a direct reference to it with the space stations they build in that, with the large arcologies
yeah,
and zero G farms.
exactly.
But I think I know where you're going with that. In one of the vistas, you can see a Disneyland style park.
Yes, isn't that crazy? So the future of Disney can go anywhere, and we'll talk about those from time to time. But let's start with this episode, and we're going to pick a spot. And do you have a recommended spot we can talk about?
So I think the first spot we wanted to start with is, let's break everybody's hearts, or maybe half the fandom's hearts, and the other half of the fandom, they'll be cheering us on, and we're going to completely bulldoze It's a Small World in the Magic Kingdom. And now
Oh,
we have that space to play with.
yes. So everybody walk down Main Street, go through the castle, walk around the carousel, take a left, and you're standing in front of It's a Small World. It's an attraction that's been there since opening day. It's a really cool attraction. It started at the 1964 World's Fair in New York, and it was an attraction for UNICEF. So it raised a lot of money. It was actually a fundraiser when it started building when
And
it started up.
sponsored by Pepsi, wasn't it? That was back
Yeah,
when a lot of people associated Disney and Pepsi together in the 50s and 60s when it came to the Disneyland park and the World's Fair. Nowadays, you just think of Coca-Cola. It's interesting to see how they've shifted that.
yeah, yeah. So it was brought over to Disneyland in
Hmm.
their Fantasyland area, and then when they built the Magic Kingdom, it was one of the staple attractions in Disneyland in its own building. So it doesn't have an exterior clock facade, the Mary Blair facade. Everybody's familiar with, but so it's a building, and that's what we're going to be dealing with. So what we'll do is we'll actually try to imagine what we can do with that building. We can either
Okay,
change.
so this isn't like in SimCity or in this
Yeah.
analogy where we haven't bulldozed the building. You've got the building. We're going to gut it completely. We're taking the attraction out. For any purists, for any people who are about to ticket us or protest us, they're moving it to Epcot or maybe something like that. And then they're giving Jeff and Mark a chance to give us their pitch on what to replace there.
Well, no, we can bulldoze the building if we want to. How about
If we
that?
want
Let's just
to.
make everybody mad. So, anything goes. Seriously. Okay. A little bit about myself, who I am. I'm a product engineer, product designer. I've been designing products for 20 years, and so this is what I do every single day. I think of concepts and I bring them to reality once a day, every day, and it's really, really interesting. When you do that, when you're coming up with some ideas to address something that might work, you start with things that are very, very meager, and you start with some things that are very, very extreme and sometimes offensive. And what you'll do when you do that is you'll actually discuss, you're going to throw it out. You're not going to do it. But in the exercise, you'll actually think of things that are maybe useful for something else down the road. And so we can talk about that. So it is okay to go to these extremes if you'd like to.
Let's do it. Bring in the
Yeah, let's
wrecking
be
ball.
fun. It's a small world.
And almost an interesting inverse of your role, as I currently work as a financial services technology product manager. So my job is to go to the marketplace, see what people are hungry for, what do they want sold to them, and to try to work with someone who's actually smart like you to build it. So in the old IBM world of managers and engineers, I'm the pointy-haired boss who says just make the magic happen inside the box.
All right. And everybody makes the magic. All right. Let's make the magic.
Make the ones and
Okay.
zeros do what they do.
Okay. So what we'll do is I have two concepts. Do you have any concepts?
I have a strong concept that I want to focus on between your best concept and your second concept.
Okay. Well, let's go through our strong concepts first. Let's go. I'll go first. How about that?
Okay.
Okay. So we have the building. We have the building. And so what we're going to do is we're going to actually reconcept the entire attraction. It's a Small World is going away.
Bye-bye.
Now, let me bookmark that statement for later in our show. Okay. So digest that in your mind first and find some acceptance because what we're going to do is fun. Now, one of my rules for this concept is that Fantasyland must remain Fantasyland, and it must be made better, and the attraction must make Fantasyland better. So here's my idea: is we keep much of the actual boat ride itself. We keep the ramp pathway down to the loading area intact, but we change everything else around it. We take the entire track layout as it is today, and we put a bypass in there, and we reduce the whole boat ride to maybe just a little bit over half of what it is right now.
All right.
Okay, so that's the structure. The theme, if you remember Sleeping Beauty's castle, who was the villain in Sleeping Beauty?
I believe that was Maleficent.
Maleficent, yes. And who was the princess? Princess Aurora.
Princess Aurora, that's right.
So these are the characters of this attraction. The beginning of the attraction is focused on Aurora. So you're entering this fantasy realm that includes lots of nature, lots of grass, trees, willows, waterfalls, but also all these little creatures that you've never seen in Fantasyland before. Things like little sprites and fairies and wood elves and pigs and porcupines and all these little things. And they're all interacting and playing and leaping and jumping. And Aurora is there to have a conversation with them along the way. And this is the boat ride. But we're traveling along, winding these paths, and we see different little areas of her kingdom along the way, her castle in the background, things like that. So it almost feels like the boat ride in Animal Kingdom. What was it called?
Is it the Navi River Journey?
Yeah, it feels like that, except it's a little bit more expressive, a little lighter, a little fresher, and it's pure fantasy all throughout. It is a place for.
Let me ask you
Yeah,
a question here.
yeah.
In the traditional original Disneyland Fantasyland attractions, there was a concept that the guest did not have related to them the best way possible. They did not understand that they themselves were supposed to put themselves as the protagonist. You are Snow White, you are Peter
Right.
Pan. So that's why they don't appear in these attractions. Who is the audience? Is it just a passive observer? Are we people in the kingdom that subjects? Are we seeking her out? Or are we just completely invisible passive observers?
We're passive observers, but we're probably subjects in that kingdom, traveling along the way. We may even be some of the fairies ourselves. So it's whatever you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And what this is leading to is we're traveling along the river in this literally a fantasy land as we trug along. And the journey becomes just a little bit darker along the way. Every turn you take, there's something a little bit more sinister the deeper you go. And the end of this journey takes us to a much darker place, much darker rooms, more purples, more blacks, more dark lights, all of that. And it almost becomes a dark attraction. Not enough to completely scare the kids, but just enough.
Not
Now,
on the Snow White Scary Adventures level, but something a little tingle up the spine a little.
maybe that far, maybe a little further. Here's why. If you remember the area of the boat ride of today's Small World, just before it leads into the exit area,
Mm-hmm.
where it has the sign of all the languages of goodbye,
Mm-hmm.
that becomes a new drop-off area right there, just hidden away from the entrance area, just around the corner where you can't see it. This is the new exit. So guests will disembark the boats, and they'll be within a castle at that point, and they'll walk some other ramps to get to a different area. Now this is where we may have to actually build the building out just a little bit, because what we're going to experience next, remember what you just talked about being the character, about becoming the character.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly you're Maleficent herself, and the mechanics of the attraction changes exactly to the same thing that is used for the other Pandora attraction.
The Flight of Passage.
Yes. And in 4 separate rooms, giant screens. You mount a device where you become Maleficent. I don't want to see you mount Maleficent. That's not a good idea.
No.
But you have wings, you have horns. Maybe you have some glasses that have little horns off the side of them.
Oh, I
But
like that. Yeah. Yeah. You wear you put on the glasses and you receive her visions,
yes,
you
you
know.
receive her, I don't want to say her evilness, but you can feel her power because you are her power now, and you're going to take flight.
So
And you
now we're going to take flight. Now we are in your attraction here. We're becoming the villain.
are becoming the villain right after where we just witnessed the princess. And
Now let
there's
me
a
ask
little
you something. Your little drop off area where we now walk into this ramp inside maybe this moldy looking, castle dungeon. Is there maybe a little exit there for the chickens or for the little ones that like, what?
yeah.
We just want to take them on the boat ride. My wife, Mary Ellen, she always says she wants a lever installed in Splash Mountain so that when you get to the last drop, if the majority rules, like old school Horizons, if everyone decides let's just skip that big drop and they all pull that lever, then it would bypass the lift hill and just go around to the celebration.
It's a brilliant idea. It's right there. It would be very convenient to do that. Yes, I agree with that. But wouldn't it be really nice to have an attraction that has 2 experiences in one attraction, and both of them to be almost extreme? And there's nothing like the Flight of Passage anywhere else in the world except Animal Kingdom. And it's a great mechanism. It's a great ride concept. And if you applied that to the Magic Kingdom and had other people experience something like that may not want to try the Pandora experience, try this one and really plus up Fantasyland. That would be something really spectacular.
It's going next generation. It's putting what I would say is a very reliable system from being a Disney World local, and that's one of the perspectives I can help bring. I know you come here pretty often, and you've also lived here though. But Flight of Passage is a very reliable attraction. And I would say since Galaxy's Edge opened, it doesn't have necessarily the 2-hour waits it used to have, maybe an hour or so, but it's a big draw. And as someone who has never seen James Cameron's Avatar film, I love Pandora and I love that attraction. And just imagine if you take something that has a little bit more cultural resonance and put it in Fantasyland, like you said, put a killer e-ticket attraction like that.
It needs it.
It
Fantasyland
does.
needs an e-ticket attraction, and this would be fantastic for that. The building is one of the largest buildings in the Magic Kingdom, and it can house a lot of these things. And you could, if you had to add to it a little bit to implement this, it would not be too much of a big deal to do
I
that.
could even see if you look how they sort of grafted Soarin' onto the land building, and when you have especially that third theater, when you leave the third theater and you have to walk through all these winding corridors and almost underneath the land before you come back out the exit. It's pretty amazing. And if you instead theme that not to show just carpeted walls and travel posters, but imagine it's rickety old dungeon and leaks and skeletons and things like that. To me, if you had to build, like I said, like that tunnel to get behind the building and build the theater there, that just adds to the experience.
Yeah, you look through an attic window and you see the spinning wheel sitting there.
Yeah, you have to have reference to that.
Yeah. So that's my idea. Maleficent.
I like it.
Maleficent and Aurora in the same, and you keep a lot of the structure, you keep the boat ride, so there's a little bit of Small World nostalgia that remains. And we'll talk about that bookmark later in the show. Let's come back to that. Okay.
So when we originally decided to do this podcast, I think this was the first real idea that you had in mind. I knew you had a really strong concept for this, and I struggled with mine at first. I really did. And I racked my brain and I said, okay, go back, look at the Walt Disney classics of animation. What are some of your favorites? What would you want to see there from my perspective? And as a kid, I loved the Pinocchio movie. And I thought about that for a second, as Disneyland has a Fantasyland Pinocchio attraction, but all Magic Kingdom ever got in regards to Pinocchio was a Jiminy Cricket meet and greet, and the restaurant that now serves dissatisfying flatbread pizzas. And I used to joke, I used to say as a kid, when I was riding It's a Small World and you look up and see all the people inside Pinocchio's village house and you can see the meeting, I said, ooh, man, there's nothing fancier, nothing more than the height of luxury than sitting up there and waving to everybody as they float by. So I said, okay, if I'm given carte blanche, if I'm said reimagine the space, I want a Pinocchio attraction. And it would be really easy just to say, copy what they did in Disneyland, put it in Magic Kingdom and call it a day. And then all the Disneyland devotees would say the original is better. But I want to go something a little different. So first, I'm going to start with the name of the attraction. I struggled with this. Jiminy Cricket's Conscience Guides. You start off, you go into the entrance, which is all going to be a reimagined space. And you go inside Geppetto's workshop and you see the Blue Fairy, who in a pre-show room, she comes to you in a group. Let's say that you let in a group of 16 to 20 people each, very similar to how.
So we're walking.
And I'm very impressed to how Rise of the Resistance has incorporated pre-shows and the queue experience as part of the attraction. Yes. When I see people online who chafe at waiting in line for attractions, I've never had a problem waiting for an attraction if it's a highly themed environment, if there's interesting things to look at, and if there's something going on. And so I love that metering out of the pre-shows. I've always, going back to Flight of Passage, I've never used a fast pass for it except once. And I was disappointed because you don't get to go through the science facility, the jungle, the laboratory. You don't get to see the avatar and the mineral bath. You miss so much.
Yeah, you have to enter that realm and experience that feeling.
Yeah, if you're just trying to be like a Six Flags and use an express pass to get on the next item and next item, I really like, and they did, Disney Imagineering did say when they recently revamped the Peter Pan's flight queue, that they wanted to put something in that standby queue that was a unique experience that the Fast Pass people didn't get, to sort of encourage a person or at least incentivize them to try it once. And
I have to say, it works very well. You're right about this. This is a great idea. Yeah.
So you go and you see the Blue Fairy, and part of what I think attractions need to start doing, or I think is going to be part of the next generation of it, is the customization of making you part of the attraction. I like what you said about yours, is you're going to become Maleficent. But in my vision of this attraction, just like when you go onto Test Track and you design your ride vehicle, I love going through the main Test Track line and designing the ride vehicle. I actually think that interface is fun. You play with it. You can make crazy, ridiculous vehicles. My problem with it is it doesn't actually affect any of the ride experience. You get some performance stats based on one of the 4 attributes that you chose, whether it was power, efficiency, or braking, but it doesn't physically change anything about the attraction.
Right. You travel the same speed across the whole round. Everything is the same.
Exactly. Now I'm gonna ask you this: have you ever seen the ride footage, or you may have actually been on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride in Shanghai Disneyland?
Yes, I've done this attraction.
You know how the Jack Sparrow transforms from a skeleton to Johnny Depp?
Yes.
That amazing effect. Dig this. When you're with the Blue Fairy, she takes you to a magical screen or mirror of some sort, and you will design your conscience for the ride. You're going to pick his hat. You're going to pick, what is he? Is he a cricket? Is it a squirrel? Is it a cat? You pick what animal. You pick what outfit he's wearing. Does he have a big bow tie? You've got top hat and tails, and it's going to have all these different customizable features. But beyond just the visuals and combinations there, you'll also pick his attributes. Is he brave? Is he intelligent? Is he cautious? Is he a worrywart? You're going to have several different options there.
This is very
When you,
cool. The interface of doing this, you could introduce new technologies that's touchless.
oh
No touch
yeah,
screens.
you could just say swipe left, swipe right, or put him in.
Yeah,
Give him.
reach.
You could just have the kid say, "I want him to have a big silly hat," and it picks one of the 5 random silly hats it has.
Yeah, or just reach out, pretend your arm is grabbing something, and it moves. Just seeing the hand.
Or I just even had a different idea. You're in Geppetto's workshop. You could even point to different toys and puppets that he has in there to sort of pick and choose different parts. But regardless how you put your conscience together, this is now the conscience that's going to be linked to your ride vehicle. So you ask people how many in your party, 2 people in your party, 4 people in your party. Those groups will pick someone, probably the kid, but if not, it might be some pushy adult who will be designing the conscience for their ride vehicle.
Wow.
When you do that and then get to your ride vehicle, you scan your magic band or your QR code or whatever we're using at this point, and you get in your vehicle. When you go through the ride, and it would be a Pinocchio style experience, you have, your typical story. He's going to school and then he joins Stromboli's stage show, and then he goes to Pleasure Island and he gets swallowed by Monster the Whale. There's going to be subtle and extreme differences in the ride attraction based on the characteristics of the conscience you created.
Interesting.
And randomized sequences. So think of like Star Tours, where on one ride you could go to Hoth and Coruscant, and on a different ride you go to Naboo and the Death Star. So your conscience will be a character in the show scenes. And imagine an animatronic that's covered in LEDs. And just like that Jack Sparrow effect, when you see the conscience in your story, it's the one you designed. He actually comes to life. He's in the ride. And that was your character who's helping Pinocchio make his choices. And because of that, you could have branching paths. It would be like a trackless ride vehicle system. And remember the fake out in the Indiana Jones ride where it looks like you could go down one of 3 different paths, but you really just go down one.
Yeah.
Even if it's just one track, your car gets different experiences. So different effects will trigger and different story elements will occur based on that appearance and personality of your Jiminy Cricket conscience.
Yeah, the show building is so large, you could actually have alternate paths that cross throughout with different show scenes that you
Yeah, and then the idea is so that when people realize this, then you want them to know this so they get off the ride and say, "Oh, that was so great. Let's go again, but we got to do a totally different type of conscience. We got to do the brave one. We got to do the intelligent one." And
and after the first time, they may not know that it goes different the second time until they do it, and they're like, "Whoa, that's not what I saw the first time. What happened?" Then they go a third time to figure out how it works.
Again, just like me, I always think of the bottom line and what's the killer merchandise. And just like I said, you have these customizable consciences. Is that the plural? Conscience guides, we'll call them.
Yes.
When you exit through the gift shop, there is a conscience Build-A-Bear type setup that you scan, you let them see, okay, what was your build? And a cast member can put that, or even a machine can put that together in just a couple of seconds. Oh, here it is. And then, oh, mommy, I have to have that. That's the one I built. Look, he's got the purple hat and everything. So
yeah, and it could actually work for both Jiminy Cricket and Pinocchio, because if Pinocchio's conscience changes, that changes Pinocchio, and you could have
that to me is the different adventures. So like you could choose the intelligent one, but then you missed the Stromboli scene. Well, he didn't go join the circuit. He didn't go become a performer because he was smart. So he ended up going to school. Well, we just saw a boring school scene. I don't want to see that. Yeah. So it's almost counterintuitive where if you make a troublemaker conscience, you may get more extreme and humorous scenes.
Yeah, and then just like in the Galaxy's Edge after the Millennium Falcon, the Smuggler's Run. When you go into the bar, I'm sorry, I've not been to Galaxy's Edge before, but when you go to Ogo's Cantina,
Yep.
isn't there an experience where if you had some sort of outcome on the Millennium Falcon, you have a certain response in that restaurant?
That there's an alleged component to that,
Mhm.
and I do know that like when
Did they
I
ever
fly
develop that?
Smuggler's Run, you get the different outcomes. And just an aside about Smuggler's Run,
Okay.
and I was actually talking to a mutual friend of ours about this attraction today. I'm a huge fan of it. I think I might be one of the biggest fans of Smuggler's Run, and I don't know if it's been as warmly received by the overall community. There's a lot of competitive gamer types that when they go on it and they're stuck in the engineer or gunner seat and they're with another party that put a toddler in the pilot seat and they can, oh, we just crashed the whole time, we didn't get all three coaxiums. I got to tell you, it's more fun to crash. It's better to have a little kid who's in the pilot seat and he's crashing and all the effects are going off. And when you get to the very end, Hondo tells you that, oh my goodness, all the repairs to the Falcon. And then when you leave the cockpit, the exit area will have more battle damage and frayed wires and explosions going off, and you hear the that Star Wars fire alarm going off. So I love that. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
I don't need to get all 16,000 credits, but there was supposed to be some sort of game component to that, but I've never seen it in action, nor have I heard it reported in action. I have a suspicion with the resort coming online and the day excursion guests, that's where you're going to see that really play out.
Yeah. I thought I brought it up because you could have some added experience in the Village House restaurant beside it when you finish the ride and maybe go in there for some chicken strips or whatever you want. If one of your options in your experience on the ride was that, let's just say, Pinocchio became a donkey and couldn't get out of that state, he was permanently a donkey. You could see something like that come out in the restaurant somehow. You're like,
Well, that'd be
oh, by
interesting.
the
Yeah.
way, Pinocchio's still a donkey, or I don't know. But same concept that they're tried, or they conceived of in Galaxy's Edge could be attempted there. Something like you could extend that through the park somehow. So I think
But
that's a great idea. I think that
I've always been a
adds
fan
interest in it.
of ways to make. This might be more of the locals' perspective, the person that goes to the parks 2-3 times a month, uh, to have a desire to have different things changed up. I remember when they first changed Star Tours to Star Tours The Adventure Continues, which then had all the variable scenes. And that was a detraction when I was in college. I rode the Endor Express 100 times all throughout college, and I loved every single time. But the idea that now it has multiple different random scenes, and I believe it even uses like slot machine style technology to make sure there's no cast member that can guarantee you, hey, you're going to get the Death Star one here. No, they don't know what's coming up. It's all randomized.
Yeah, that was something that Michael Eisner demanded of Imagineering when he came on board. He was not too intrigued with building attractions that had permanent fixtures within. He wanted them to change, and he wanted them to change often. So the Imagineers had to conceive of ways to allow them to change often. And Star Tours and the Body Wars are one of the first attractions to attempt that. So a lot of the things that we see today
Yeah,
are
but the
generations
original
from
Star
that.
Tours opened in what, 87 in
Yeah,
Disneyland and didn't
yeah,
change until 2005?
yeah. But it's built to change.
Well,
So that was the advantage of it.
I think they converted, is it Tokyo's is now an Iron Man? No, it's Hong Kong.
Yeah, Iron
Hong
Man
Kong
Express.
now has the Iron Man attraction.
Yeah. So personally, I don't like that. I think Imagineers should work hard to build permanent fixtures and change them and invest in that. I think to me, that's better. But sometimes when you're called to use screens and things like that, and I know a lot of people, they cringe at the word screens and they spell it with a letter Z at the end of it, and just to spite the word. I think it could be done right. I think when it's used in intriguing places and hidden places, and when you frame it right, it can work. And I think that attraction, there's places where that it can work. And I think even in the river ride at Pandora, I think they do a good job there. When I was at Shanghai Disney, they had in the castle, you get to walk through the castle, and there's a whole storytelling experience inside the castle. It's actually called Storybook Castle, and there's a scene in there with Snow White at the wishing well, and the way the scene is built and crafted and sculpted is up to the surface of a display where Snow White is doing her action. And at first glance, you have to say, "Oh, that's a display." So it's not very obvious, and I think that's a really really good application of that. The more they do stuff like that, the more I can adopt it.
I think there's always going to be an inherent verisimilitude to animatronic characters. There's always the joke about robots and AI and the uncanny valley, but I think there's something that really appeals to it's all ages, but especially kids. There's something special about an audio animatronic performance that just really, I think it really activates a child's imagination. That I don't have a problem with screens in and of
Yeah.
themselves, or especially when they're used to help facilitate an environment. You put
Yes.
physical props and scenes in a room with screens, and then you can get some amazing combinations.
Yes. My opinion is that if these flat panel displays with high definition and millions of colors and great backlighting, if those had existed back in the 50s, Walt Disney would have really used them a lot. I
Oh,
think
of course.
he would absolutely have
It would have put in
pushed that.
the windows of the
Yeah.
original Tiki room would have had
Yeah.
all of that. Just I sometimes laugh now at the effects of the wind and the rain back there when I'm in there, because now they could do so much more. In fact, even in the Grog Grotto, they have more next gen type effects of that same kind of
Yeah.
effect.
So your attraction has a great walkthrough experience, a great setup experience, great ride experience. So now, these vehicles are be similar to maybe what you see at Mickey and Minnie's Railway and those
I
kind
would
of
say
things.
I would say I would say my ride vehicle would be maybe more similar to the Rise of the Resistance or the Remy's Ratatouille Adventure, probably even
Okay,
closer to that, because I was
cool.
looking for groups of 2 to 4. Uh, the idea that a party's conscience is active with them. So if you had 2 separate parties in a vehicle, what are they going to have? Two warring consciences. So that's a little difficulty of the ride itself. So I was thinking keeping it as small as possible, but I was thinking I kind of erred there. Okay, we'll say groups of 4.
Yeah.
Um, it even could be such a thing as the people sitting on the left see one character and the people sitting on the right see another, or front row, back row. Even maybe there could be an experience there to be had where you load one row forward facing, another row backwards facing, and you get a different experience that way.
I think that would be a great addition to the Magic Kingdom, having that technology. You kind of see it right now with the Winnie the Pooh's Mini Adventures. Kind of, it's still tracked, but the vehicle does weeble and wobble and travel in the water a little bit. It's sort
I
of
actually think
there.
that water effect where you're supposed to be floating through is underrated,
Yeah,
and
I do
I
too.
wonder if like an effect like that is more desired in the future. When I think of the rides Disney's built in the last 30 years, I think of like Disney Sea has a 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea attraction, but you don't go underwater. It's all an effect of you
Right.
being underwater. So you don't have to deal with the maintenance issues and the safety issues regarding an actual submerged attraction.
So that would be nice. I like it.
Well, what
Okay.
was your? We got a few minutes left. What was your second pitch for the Disney Space? It's a Small World in Walt Disney World. We were taking it out
Okay.
and we're replacing it.
You remember how I said one of my rules is that we actually nuke the building and replace it?
Yep.
I'm going to go one step worse. You're going to hate
Oh
this.
boy.
I'm going to nuke the building and we're not going to replace it. If you look at Google, and remember, we have a bookmark coming up after these discussions, so I'm going to save that bookmark.
All
But
right.
if you go to Google Earth and you look at the map of the Magic Kingdom, the satellite map, you'll notice that the Pinocchio's village house is connected kind of at an angle to this very, very large building that is the small world. It's a small world show building, which is an alleyway east of the Haunted Mansion show building.
Right next door.
Yeah, and it's kind of a 2-level building because the utilidors underneath. So if you get rid of that building, it sort of goes downhill a little bit. But if you look behind each of these buildings, there's a very large open wood space. There's a like a little alleyway and a little service building, but there's a lot of trees that's on the inside of the Walt Disney World Railroad to the north, and you have the Rivers of America to the west. And that would be a really, really good spot for a brand new extended land right there that I think we can hold in reserve for another show.
So you're talking about if you're riding on the Walt Disney World Railroad, which is a beloved attraction of mine that's been gone for years now. Hopefully, it will be back soon. You would go past the Native American village, and on your left would be water retention way, but on the right is like you said, a heavily wooded area. To the east of it is a retention pond, but like you said, that is a patch of earth that you could easily fit. Let's see, most of Fantasyland you could copy in there, at least half of Tomorrowland. Yeah, you could definitely do something interesting back there.
It's about the size of Liberty Square, I would say. And if you take out the show building of It's a Small World, you have a lot of space right there to sort of start the path, bring it back and forth. Because I think you'd have to come in and out of that space, sort of like the Muppets area of the studios. And there's a lot you could do right there, I think. But I think we really have to think about our bookmark that we're going to talk about later on to allow that to be digestible. Because I think a lot of people are throwing tomatoes at their podcast devices right now.
That's all right.
Saying, get rid of It's a Small World in the Magic Kingdom. Are you nuts?
I think with we're going to probably play in Disney World spaces more than Disneyland, at least at first. Yeah. And I think part of the reason you can get away with that is, other than Country Bear Jamboree, was there anything that opened in the Magic Kingdom that opened there first? I think our Space Mountain was first by 2 years. But that's really more analogous to the Matterhorn experience in terms of ride system.
There is, but I can't think of any of it. There absolutely is.
I can't think of anything. The Hall of Presidents. That's another, but that's analogous to Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, sort of the sequel there.
Yeah.
And then the Return to the Jedi version would be American Adventure. Oh, and there's a lot we could do in that pavilion as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's things in Tomorrowland that came first, but it's not opening day.
Nothing iconic that you can think of. So that's why I feel like, especially with Magic Kingdom, you can get away with doing something like, where we're getting rid of It's a Small World, or we're getting rid of Jungle Cruise, because you can always say, well, they still have the original in Disneyland.
Yeah, and that's what this show is for, is to think of those things that are rather extreme. Disney will never do it, but if they were to do it, what sort of pluses can we get out of it, and what can we do with what's left over? And that's worth discussion, I think.
I like it. I can't wait to discuss your bookmark idea further. I also want to do a show eventually in the future about seasonal overlays, like a Nightmare Before Christmas style transformation to Disneyland's Haunted Mansion. What else could we do with a concept like that, and what attractions would something like that work?
Yeah, I know they're talking about Muppets in the Haunted Mansion. Hasn't that come up?
The Muppets are now in a weird state there. I think they're actually underneath the Imagineering domain, and they're trying to use the Muppets now to promote the parks. The Muppets are having a Disney Plus special about they're calling it Muppet Haunted Mansion. I think they actually filmed in Disneyland's Haunted Mansion.
Maybe that's it.
That looks exciting.
Yeah. Okay.
And hey, that's another idea. Bringing in film crews and creating, streaming content, feature content that's based on the actual attractions. These are
absolutely,
the Disney attractions are designed and built by filmmakers and animators, not by they didn't get architects. They got people that designed Hollywood sets and know things like
Mhm.
forced perspective and tricks like that. So
You know, they did that in the early days of Epcot. There was a show on the Disney Channel called Epcot Magazine, hosted by Michael Young,
mhm.
and it was really kind of a deep dive into the sciences and technologies and travels. And it was kind of just like a segment by segment show. Very educational. I was a young teenager when I first saw it, and it really drew me in. It really made me excited about not just Epcot, but everything that was new in the world. So yeah, that's been done before, and you could bring things like that back and do things just like that. Yeah. Okay, what's your concept?
So
If you have a second.
I really didn't have a secondary concept for It's a Small World, other than I just want to. I really love the idea of, if we're going to repurpose the space to transport the attraction to somewhere in Epcot, and I actually like. I think you had the idea
Yeah,
of putting it
this is our
behind the Germany
bookmark.
show building.
Yes, this is our bookmark. If you look at the Germany building, I think a lot of people know this. There is existing space behind there, and there's actually doorways to it. An entire boat show space for a boat for what was going to be a Rhine River ride, Rhine
Hmm.
River experience in Germany. They never built it, but the space is there. It's occupied space right now, and I think World Showcase in general would be a fantastic place to put It's a Small World, just because of what it is. It's about all the countries of the world. What better place to put it than World Showcase? And if we chose Germany as its host pavilion, you could actually, I think they would have to add to that space. I think they would have to build out some more behind it to fit it all
Oh,
in there,
probably, yeah.
because it's sort of a short ride what's there now. But wouldn't that just be something to add, not just to add to Germany, but to give it really that sort of alpine feel to it on the
Well,
outside?
there is something kind of Germanic about it. Like, I
I
think
think
of
so.
the cuckoo clocks that are on sale there in the German pavilion. I always love looking at those and how elaborate they are. And there is something about It's a Small World that is like a large cuckoo clock going off. It's kind of noisy. It's a little annoying, but it's cute
Uh-huh.
enough to get away with it.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. That I think it would adopt very well in Germany because of those aspects of it. And, you know, you could also put it where the Millennium Village is now. You could put it where Equatorial Africa was going to go. Maybe give it kind of an an African type of feel to it, something that it hasn't had before, just a new imagined theme to it a little bit.
That would be something, maybe
So
a different
yeah,
perspective. I actually always thought the Odyssey building, which is currently being used as a preview center for the changes of Epcot, but I don't really see that ever being a real bustling food restaurant in the future, especially now with Space 220 coming online.
yeah,
So I thought, that's a space I'd really like to get my hands on.
yeah. It's a small world in Epcot. So guys, when we say we're going to nuke the building in the Magic Kingdom, we're not getting rid of it. We want to move it to Epcot. I think that would
Yeah.
be a fabulous idea. It would benefit both Epcot and the Magic Kingdom.
And I think it fits. I really do. And again, no one can complain because the original is still in Disneyland.
Yeah. Okay. So what really do you think will happen with It's a Small World over the long term? Is it a permanent attraction forever, or do you think it may change?
Everyone always whips out the Mr. Disney quote about the parks are not museums and they're always changing. Um, I think of my personal experiences with the park and try to relate those to everyone else. It it's such a cornerstone attraction when you say I'm going to Disneyland or I'm going to Disney World. In pop culture, people will start singing that song and they'll think about the little dolls going on and on dressed in all the different outfits, and
Yes.
it's it's so iconic and family friendly and really has a genuinely positive message. The Sherman Brothers said the song is a prayer for peace amidst the Cold War. When you really think of what that means, and the the doom of mutual assured destruction hanging over the world, I think it's a really positive thing that's there. And I've always kind of bristled when I hear people who say that that song annoys them. Now, granted, the exit queue can back up sometimes, and if you're stuck in the final room for 20 minutes, yeah, okay, that does get annoying. But no, I think it's overall a positive experience, and I think of like Ghostbusters 2, where they had the mood slime and they had to negatively or positively charge it. I think there's a positive charge you get when you come off that attraction, and I think like Haunted Mansion, like Peter Pan's Flight, I think these are cornerstone attractions that probably won't go anywhere. I think attractions like Tomorrowland Speedway or the Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor or even Winnie the Pooh, which I want to have some serious discussions about Winnie the Pooh in that location in Magic Kingdom.
We'll add that to the DisneySpace list. That'll
Yeah,
be show,
we're
show
going to have a
number X.
real extensive list, and we want to keep doing this weekly. So if you're listening to us, we're going to try to get this out on September 17th. That's a Friday, and we want to keep a regular schedule of new episodes every Friday, at least an hour of us having these conversations. So we want to thanks again for listening. Don't forget, I didn't even plug my own thing, even though I rarely do it anymore. But I am one of the two hosts of a husband and wife team, Jeff and Mary Ellen. We host WDW Scope. It's a live streaming vlog, currently exclusive on Twitter. You can follow us at WDW Scope. And the answer to everyone's question is no, we're not on YouTube. We're always looking for more. We were on the Periscope platform for quite some time,
which I miss. I miss that.
Periscope was really fun. It was instant. We could have done this podcast on Periscope if that still existed, and I probably would have just done it that way. Just made its own account. But we still have a lot of fun going out to Disney World. So you can catch us on Twitter, on Instagram. WDW, that stands for Walt Disney World, and it was Scope as in Periscope, but now it's just Scope as in, hey, we're scoping it out. But I just ordered the new DJI Osmo Mobile 5, the motion stabilizer, so that's my recommitment into doing more in-park live streaming.
I can't wait to see that.
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I think we're a good yin and yang. You go to Disney, you go to the parks frequently recently, so you've been there in the past several years. My first time with the park was in 1972.
I can't beat that.
I was a young baby. So we went every year from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So I got to witness the very early generational growth and introduction of everything. I have vivid memories of the Magic Kingdom before Epcot was dirt. So I think we have that type of. This is a good contribution for coming up with DisneySpace ideas, is thinking on those two terms, recent and old. A little bit about myself. I am I'm a product engineer. I do a lot of product design and development. I've written a book on product development, and that's what I would like to plug. It's called The Simplified Development Process. You can find it on Amazon. Look for Simplified Development Process by Mark Thompson. And my Twitter site is at 6 miles tall. That's number 6 miles tall. And that's
a reference to Mr. Walt Disney was giving his Epcot pitch, and he was showing the map of Disney World. He was relating that he would be 6 miles tall on that map.
That's correct. He put a stick up to the top of his head and stood straight up and tall and said, "I am 6 miles tall." So that means Walt Disney. And nobody took that Twitter site address, so it was available. I took it. Haha.
I like it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for listening. And if anyone has any suggestions, ideas, pitches, they want us to, give us spaces that you want us to reimagine, we're going to be publishing this on multiple different podcast formats. I know I'm going to be promoting this on my personal Twitter. Mark, you probably will as well. We'll have a Twitter account for the podcast itself. I already set that up. So you can probably send us messages or tweets there as well if you've got any feedback, if you think our ideas are silly, if you don't like the cuts of our jib, just let us know.
Do you know our Twitter address?
It is.
Go back up. This is our first show, guys. We have to go look to see what it is.
It is at DisneySpace Pod.
At DisneySpace Pod.
So that is the DisneySpace as a reimagining spaces in Walt Disney World, Disneyland, and spaces beyond.
And we have a email address as well that we could give out.
Oh, let's do it.
Yeah. It's the same thing at gmail.com, isn't it? DisneySpacePod@gmail.com.
You know what? I believe you're right.
Yeah. So what I would actually like to recommend too is that if any of our listeners have ideas for what they would like to see with It's a Small World, go ahead and send it to us. We'll take a look. Maybe we'll give you a mention on the next show.
Yeah, and we're thinking about having special guests on. So if you want to come on and give us your pitches, just let us know.
Yeah. So we have to set up next week. We have a Disney space for next week, and I want you to think about 2 concepts for this space. Do you remember Flight to the Moon?
I do.
Have you ever experienced Flight to the Moon?
Well, actually, I never experienced Flight to the Moon, but I do remember Mission to Mars.
Now, I'm told that I experienced Flight to the Moon, but I think I was asleep in a stroller. But I was there. So yes, next it was Mission to Mars, and then it was Alien
Extraterrestrial Encounter.
Yes.
And then Stitch's
Stitch's Great Escape.
Was that the name of the attraction? Or is it, the movie was Lilo and Stitch? Okay, yeah, Stitch's Great Escape.
Stitch Encounter.
Yeah, the Stitch, which regardless of whatever you feel about the Stitch attraction, the animatronics in there were really impressive.
Yeah, I agree.
The chili dog breath I could have done without, but the tracking lasers and the Stitch creature, top notch.
They were very convincing. even as a grown man, I was quite nervous about the whole encounter.
I think that's just having those chairs clamped down on your shoulders. That's the.
I went to bed at the Caribbean Beach Resort, and there the alien was on the ceiling, ready to come jump at me.
Oh,
okay. So this space actually is not used today. So this will be a really great space to talk about because
just the initial queue portion is occasionally used for meet and greets and candy distribution during Halloween events.
Yeah. And certainly in the halls of Imagineering, even though those halls are about to move, they are reimagining the space. You can bet on that. So it will turn into something someday. But let's imagine to see what we might turn it into. And we'll do that next week.
I'm going to put my melon to it.
Yeah.
Mark, thanks again. And thanks you all to listening to Disney Space.
Thanks, Jeff.